Every terabyte of flash storage in the world, every SSD, every smartphone chip, every data center drive is built from a single repeating structure that is barely more complicated than the MOSFET you studied in your first semiconductor course. A standard MOSFET gate stack has four layers: the metal gate on top, the gate oxide underneath it, the channel in the silicon, and the bulk substrate below that. A flash cell adds one more layer between the gate oxide and the control gate above it. That extra layer is the charge storage node, and the charge storage node and the charge is stored in that node in the data. Now, this left panel shows the standard MOSFET. Gate at the top, gate oxide in light blue below it, N-type source and drain regions on either side of the channel, P-type substrate. Nothing unusual, you recognize this. The right panel shows the floating gate flash cell. It's the same structure with one addition: the gold layer between the gate oxide and the control gate. That's the floating gate, an isolated polysilicon conductor with no electrical connection to any terminal. Nothing can reach it directly. The only way charge can get on and off it is by tunneling through the oxide layers oxide above and below. The label floating gate is exactly descriptive. It floats electrically with no connection to the outside world. Charge placed on it stays there because there's nowhere to go without overcoming an enormous energy barrier. The arrow and the annotation show that what the stored charge does to the transistor. It shifts the threshold voltage. That threshold voltage shift is the electrical signature of a programmed versus erased state. Everything else about Flash, the program operation, the erase operation, the read operation, the degradation mechanisms, follow from that one physical fact. Now, the threshold voltage of a transistor is the gate voltage at which the channel starts conducting. Below that voltage, the transistor is off. Above it, current flows. Now, in a standard MOSFET, the threshold voltage is fixed by the doping profile and the oxide thickness that doesn't change during operation. In a flash cell, the threshold voltage is variable. It depends on the charge sitting on the floating gate between the control gate and the channel. Negative charge, or electrons in the floating gate, create an electric field pointing from the floating gate down toward the channel. That field opposes the field applied by the control gate. To form a conducting channel, the control gate must supply enough field to overcome both the native semiconductor threshold requirement and the opposing field from the stored charge. The result, a higher effective threshold voltage. Now, the figure shows the drain current versus gate voltage for the same flash cell in two states. The green curve is the erased state, no stored charge, threshold voltage at around minus 1.5 volts. The navy curve is the programmed state, electrons stored on the floating gate, threshold voltage shifted by around to up to 3 volts. It's the same physical cell, same oxide, same everything, except the charge on the floating gate. Now, the crimson line at 1 volt is the read voltage. At that voltage, the erased cell is well above threshold and conducts a large current. The programmed cell is well below threshold and conducts essentially nothing. So you have a large difference in the magnitude of the current between the erased cell and the programmed cell. Now, this arrow marks the threshold voltage window, the voltage distance between the erased state and the programmed state. In this example, it's around 4.5 volts. That window is the resource you have to work with. Everything you want to store, whether it's 1 bit or 4 bits per cell, has to fit inside it. Now, the floating gate is electrically isolated. That's the whole point. But if it's isolated, how does charge get there in the first place? The answer is quantum mechanical tunneling through the thin oxide separating the floating gate from the silicon channel below it. At zero bias, that oxide is an impenetrable barrier. The stored charge sits on the floating gate indefinitely because thermal fluctuations can't supply enough energy to cross a 3.1 electron volt barrier. But apply a large enough electric field across the oxide, and the barrier becomes narrow enough for electrons to quantum mechanically tunnel through it at a useful rate. The left panel shows the program operation. A high positive voltage, typically 15 to 20 volts on 3D NAND, is applied to the control gate where the substrate is held to zero. That large positive voltage creates a strong electric field along the tunnel oxide pointing upwards from the channel. Electrons in the channel tunnel upward through the oxide onto the floating gate. The red arrows show the tunneling direction, and the dots on the floating gate represent the accumulated negative charge. The right panel shows the erase operation. Now the polarity is reversed. A high positive voltage is applied to the substrate while the control gate is held low. The electric field now points downwards from the floating gate towards the channel. Electrons on the floating gate tunnel back down through the tunnel oxide into the substrate, removing the stored charge. The critical point here is that both operations use the same oxide and the same tunneling mechanism. Programming and erase are not two different physical processes. They are the same Fowler-Nordheim tunneling, driven in opposite directions by opposite polarity fields. And because NAND flash erases at the block level, all cells in a block share a common erase terminal. Every cell in a block is erased simultaneously whether you want to erase them or not. Erasing one page in a NAND block means erasing the entire block and then reprogramming all the pages you want to keep. That erase granularity constraint is the origin of write amplification and garbage collection in every flash controller ever built. Now, a single cell SLC uses the threshold voltage window to store exactly one bit. Erase state on the left side of the window, program state on the right side of the window. Two distributions separated by the full window. The sensing margin between them is generous. The error rate is extremely low and the cell is durable. Multi-level cell operation, MLC, TLC, QLC, stores more bits by dividing the same window into more threshold voltage levels. 2 bits per cell requires 4 distinguishable levels. 3 bits per cell requires 8. 4 bits per cell requires 16. Now, in the top left panel, two distributions sit in the window with roughly 2.5 volts of space between them. Comfortable margin. A sense amplifier can easily tell them apart even after years of degradation. Now, 4 states in the MLC panel, roughly 1 volt spacing, still manageable, but you've reduced the sensing margin by more than half. Now, when you go to 8 states, the spacing between adjacent distributions is now less than 400 millivolts. A threshold voltage shift of 200 millivolts, easy to accumulate from just a few hundred program erase cycles, or a single neighborhood cell write, can push a cell's threshold voltage past the boundary between adjacent states. Now 16 states, roughly 300 millivolts of spacing, the distribution in the figure looks almost merged already when drawn at a realistic sigma value. A QLC cell requires error correction codes sophisticated enough that in modern drives, the ECC engine is a significant fraction of the controller die area. Not because QLC cells are poorly made, but because the physics of cramming 16 threshold voltage levels into a 5 volt window leaves almost no room for anything to go wrong. Now, the choice of SLC, MLC, TLC, or QLC is entirely a trade between cost per bit and reliability per bit. Every additional bit per cell reduces cost. Every additional bit per cell reduces the sensing margin. Those are not independent statements, they're the same statement. Now, a fresh flash cell has a narrow, well separated threshold voltage distribution. The cell at that point has been cycled 1,000 times. This panel shows it directly. A green distribution is the fresh program state, tight, narrow, well centered at 3 volts. The crimson distribution is the same cell program state after 10,000 program erase cycles. roughly twice as wide with significant probability mass extending towards the erased state. Now, the physical cause is the damage to the tunnel oxide. Every time you drive electrons through that oxide under a high field, which is every program cycle or every array cycle, some electrons get trapped on defect sites in the oxide bulk and at the oxide silicon interface. These trapped charges don't anneal away at room temperature. They accumulate. And because they're distributed randomly through the oxide and the interface, they create a random cell to cell variation in threshold voltage that manifests as distribution broadening. After enough cycles, the distribution sigma doubles. The tails of adjacent distributions begin to overlap. A cell near the boundary between the two adjacent TLC states can read as either state depending on whom you ask. That's an uncorrectable error unless the error correction code catches it first. Now, this panel shows the second major degradation mechanism, cross coupling from neighboring cells. When a cell in a NAND string is programmed, it changes its threshold voltage, and that threshold voltage change induces a capacitive coupling shift in every cell nearby. The navy distributions show the 4 MLC states before a neighboring cell right. The crimson distributions show the same states after each one has shifted upwards by roughly 100 to 150 millivolts. The shift is not a random error, it's a systematic displacement of the entire distribution. It can be partially compensated by reading the neighboring cell state and applying a correction, which is what modern NAND controllers do. But the correction requires additional read operations and adds latency. The third mechanism, read disturb, is subtler. Every time you apply the large pass voltage needed to read a selected cell in a NAND string, the unselected cells in the same string are also stressed, slightly perturbing their stored charge. After millions of reads from the same block without an intervening erase, the cumulative read disturb can be enough to push cells out of their intended states. So every concept you've seen in this video, the floating gate structure, the threshold voltage shift, the program and erase mechanisms, the multi-level cell distributions, the degradation physics, have been deliberately kept at physical intuition level. No equations, no capacitive models, no derivations. That was intentional. You can't derive your way to intuition, you have to build the picture first and the equations second. Now C1 takes the floating gate cross section and turns it into a capacitor model. You'll derive the exact threshold voltage equation that tells you exactly how many millivolts of VT shift you get per electron added to the floating gate and how that depends on the coupling ratio between the control gate and the floating gate. C2 builds the NAND string model. How are cells wired in series? How does that create the page and block structure? How does the program inhibit mechanism work to prevent unintended programming of neighboring cells while one page is being written? C3 takes the multi-level cell distribution picture and makes it quantitative. Given a distribution sigma and a spacing between levels, what's the raw bit error rate? How does that number flow through to the required ECC strength, and how does cycling affect both? C4 and C5 go deep on the degradation mechanisms from slide 5. Full quantitative models for how trap density grows with cycling, how that trap density maps to distribution sigma, how retention time scales with cycling history, and how cross-coupling and read disturb can be measured and modeled. C6 closes the arc with the system layer, error correction codes, wear leveling algorithms, the flash translation layer. These are the engineering mechanisms that keep a TLC or a QLC NAND drive reliable for 5 years when the underlying physics seems to work against it. Every video about this one in the stack is a more precise version of a concept you just saw in a cartoon form. The cartoon is not a simplification you'll discard. It's the mental model you'll keep checking your algebra against.